My dad called me on a Tuesday morning, and the first thing he said wasn't hello. It was, "Where did you get the money for that house?" Not, "How are you?" Not, "I saw online that you bought something, congratulations." Just that flat accusatory tone I'd been hearing my whole life. The one that always made me feel like I owed him an explanation for existing. I was standing in my kitchen in Portland, still in the oversized t-shirt I'd slept in, coffee halfway to my mouth. I put the mug down slowly. "Good morning to you too," I said. "Your cousin posted a photo on Instagram. Said she was at your housewarming." "A house in Lake Oswego," she said. "That's $1 million neighborhood." He paused. "So I'm asking again. Where did you get the money?" I almost laughed. Almost. Because here's what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been waiting for this call for almost 2 years. Not dreading it. Waiting for it. Like you wait for a storm you can already smell in the air. I told him I had to call him back. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and looked out at the backyard. My backyard. The one with the Japanese maple I'd planted myself last October, and I thought about every birthday they'd forgotten. Every Christmas where my brother got the big gift and I got the "we'll make it up to you." Every time I sat at that dinner table feeling like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome in her own family. And then I thought about what my dad said next, before I could hang up. "Your mother and I want to talk to you, this weekend. Family dinner. Be here, Saturday at 6. I want to tell you what happened at that dinner, what my mother said, what I found out that night, and what I did when I finally understood the full picture. But first, tell me something. Have you ever sat in a room full of people who are supposed to love you and felt completely, utterly invisible? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'm reading every single one. Because I grew up invisible, and I didn't even know it for the longest time, which is maybe the saddest part. I'm the older one. I have a brother who's 3 years younger, and from pretty much the beginning, the family energy was organized around him. Not in an obvious way. Not in a way you could point to and say, "Look, this is proof." It was subtler than that. It was my parents missing my school play because my brother had a baseball game, and his baseball games always took priority. It was birthday dinners where my dad would spend 20 minutes talking about how proud he was of my brother's potential, and then someone would change the subject before he got to me. It was holiday photos where I was always slightly to the side, slightly out of frame, and nobody ever noticed. I noticed. I left for college in Eugene on a scholarship I had applied for entirely on my own. My parents didn't help with the applications, didn't really ask about the process. My brother, 2 years later, had both my parents driving him to campus, my mom crying, my dad giving a whole speech about new chapters. I moved myself in with 2 carloads of stuff and a roommate I'd found on a Facebook group. I didn't let it break me. I went to school. I studied finance. I got an internship, then a job, then a better job. I was careful with money in a way that probably looked boring from the outside. No fancy vacations, roommates until I was 28, cooking at home, driving a used Civic. I invested early and aggressively. I read everything I could get my hands on about real estate. When I was 31, I bought a small rental property in Gresham. Then another. Then I partnered with a colleague from my firm on a small commercial unit. By 33, I had a portfolio generating enough monthly income that my W-2 salary started to feel almost optional. I still hadn't told my family any of this. Not because I was hiding it exactly. More because they never asked. My dad would ask my brother about his business ideas, the ideas that kept changing every year, the dropshipping thing, the podcast that lasted 4 episodes, the food truck concept that never got past a spreadsheet. My mom would listen with this look on her face like he was the most fascinating person she'd ever met, and I would sit there at the table and say things like I had a good quarter at work, and they would nod and move on. So I stopped offering. If they didn't ask, I didn't tell. Last spring, I bought the house in Lake Oswego. It's a 4-bedroom craftsman, built in the 1940s, completely renovated. Big kitchen, a fireplace in the living room, a backyard that backs up to a creek. I paid cash. I'd been building toward it for 3 years. Keeping that specific property type on my radar, waiting for the right listing, moving money into position. My cousin, my dad's sister's daughter, someone I genuinely like, saw me posting about it on Instagram and asked if she could come see it. I said sure. She brought her boyfriend. It was a nice afternoon. She posted one photo, just the front of the house, a nice shot of the porch in the afternoon light. She tagged it, so proud of this one. She did the thing, that was enough. My dad called my cousin before he called me. She confirmed it was my house. Then he called me with that voice and said those words and demanded I come to dinner. I told myself I wouldn't go. I actually stood in my kitchen that afternoon and gave myself a whole speech about how I was 33 years old and I didn't have to go anywhere I didn't want to go, and I didn't owe them a single explanation about my finances. Then I thought about my grandmother. My dad's mother had passed 2 years earlier. She and I had been closer than I was with my own parents, honestly. She used to call me on my birthday without fail. Always remembered what I was working on, always asked follow-up questions the next time we talked. She was the one who took me to look at my first apartment, helped me understand a lease. She was sharp and funny, and she smelled like lavender. I missed her every day. When she died, there was a small inheritance, split between her kids, my dad, and his siblings, but she had also set aside a separate account specifically for her grandchildren's futures. My dad had mentioned it vaguely at the time, said it would help with whatever we needed. I'd never seen a dollar of it, never been asked how I wanted to use it, never been told an amount. I went to that dinner. I drove down Saturday, got there at 10 to 6. My parents live in Beaverton, about 45 minutes from my place. I wore jeans and a nice blouse. I wasn't trying to look impressive, but I also wasn't going to show up looking like I needed anything from them. My brother was already there. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a beer, and he looked up when I came in and gave me this smirk, the particular smirk he always gets when he thinks something is about to go badly for me. I'd grown up on the receiving end of that smirk. I knew exactly what it meant. My mom hugged me at the door. She smelled like the same perfume she'd worn my whole life. I hugged her back. That's the thing nobody tells you about complicated family situations. The love doesn't just disappear. It sits right next to the hurt, and they both live there together, and it's exhausting. We sat down to dinner. My mom had made pot roast. My dad was at the head of the table like always. For about 20 minutes we talked about nothing. My brother's latest idea, a real estate wholesaling business, which made me set my fork down for a second, the neighbor's new fence, something about my cousin's boyfriend. Then my dad set down his knife and looked at me. "We want to talk about this house," he said. "Okay," I said. "We don't understand where that kind of money came from. A house like that in Lake Oswego, your cousin said it looked expensive. We're your parents, we deserve to know." I looked at him. "You deserve to know about my finances?" My mom cut in quickly. "We're not trying to make this a thing. We're concerned. That's a lot of money. We want to make sure you're not in over your head." "I paid cash," I said. Silence. My brother's smirk flickered. My mom's expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. My dad went very still. "Cash," he repeated. "Cash," I said. "No mortgage." Another silence. Longer this time. My dad cleared his throat. "How?" And here's where I had a choice. I could have explained everything, the rentals, the investments, the 10 years of being careful and strategic while they were over here treating me like an afterthought. I could have laid it all out and made them understand. But instead I said, "I've been building toward it for a while. I'm doing fine. Is that actually why you called me down here? Or is there something else?" My dad looked at my mom. My mom looked at her plate. My brother took a long drink of his beer. "Your brother needs some help," my dad said finally. There it was. The real estate wholesaling business, the newest version of all the other businesses, needed startup capital. He had a deal lined up, he said. He just needed to bridge a gap. My parents had already given him everything they could. They were asking if I could contribute. "How much?" I asked. My dad named a number, $35,000. I picked up my water glass. I took a drink. I set it back down. I was very careful about how I breathed. Before I answer that, I said, "I want to ask you something. Grandma's inheritance, the account she set up for the grandchildren. What happened to it?" The air in that room changed. If you've ever been in a room when something shifts like that, when everyone stops performing normalcy at exactly the same moment, you know what I mean. My mom's hands went still. My dad looked at the table. My brother looked at his beer. "We used it," my dad said, "over the years. When your brother needed things, it was for the family. It was for the grandchildren," I said. "Plural. You were doing fine," my mom said. "You had your scholarship. You had your job. He needed it more." I want you to hear that sentence the way I heard it that night. You were doing fine. He needed it more. As if being capable, as if being self-sufficient, as if never calling home in a panic, as if all of that disqualified me from what was set aside for me by my own grandmother, as if my success meant I forfeited the inheritance, as if the reward for not needing was getting nothing. I didn't cry. I'm telling you that because I want you to know I didn't cry. Not there, not at that table. I'd spent so many years crying in private over things this family did and said, and I had made a quiet promise to myself that I was done doing that. I asked how much had been in the account. My dad told me, $42,000. Used over roughly 6 years in chunks every time my brother had a new venture or a new emergency or a new dream that needed funding. I nodded slowly. So he's had $42,000 of investment in his ideas, I said, and none of it worked, and now you're asking me to give him $35,000 more. It's family, my dad said, the way he said it, like it was an answer to something, like that word alone was supposed to override everything else. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about her calling me every year on my birthday. I thought about her sitting with me, in her living room, asking about my work, telling me she was proud of me, specifically, by name, for the things I was actually doing. I thought about how she would have felt knowing what happened to the account she'd created for both of her grandchildren. I'm not going to give him the money, I said, and I'm not going to explain my financial situation to either of you. What I do with what I've built is my business. But I would like you to understand something. I looked at my dad, then my mom. I didn't look at my brother. I've been working toward this for 10 years, on my own, without any help from this family, and without the $42,000 that was supposed to be partially mine. I don't say that to make you feel guilty. I say it because I want you to know that I'm not going to sit at this table and pretend the accounting here is fair. It isn't. My mom started to say something about how it was all so long ago, and things were complicated and they'd done their best. I pushed back my chair and stood up. I know you did your best, I said. I genuinely believe that. But I also know I've been invisible in this family for as long as I can remember. And I'm done arranging my choices around being seen by people who weren't looking. I picked up my bag. I wasn't dramatic about it. I didn't slam a door or deliver a speech, I just left. I drove back up to Portland on the 217 with the windows cracked and a podcast playing quietly, and when I got home I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my living room in the house I had built myself, piece by piece, and I let myself feel all of it. The grief, the anger, the exhaustion, and underneath all of it, something that felt a lot like relief. I talked to an attorney the following week, not for the inheritance money. Honestly, I'd already absorbed its absence long before I knew the specific dollar amount. I talked to her because I wanted to understand my options, wanted to document the conversation, wanted to make sure I had the full picture in case anything else came up. My brother's real estate wholesaling business didn't launch. I know this because my cousin told me 3 months later that he'd pivoted again, something about an online course business this time. My parents have called a few times since the dinner. I pick up sometimes. The conversations are civil and short. My mom asked once, carefully, if I was happy. I told her I was. I meant it. What I didn't tell her is that I'd closed on a second property in the same neighborhood in February, that I have a property manager now who handles the day-to-day, that the Japanese maple in my backyard is blooming this spring for the first time since I planted it, and every morning I drink my coffee and look at it and feel something I spent a long time not being able to feel. Something that takes up exactly as much space as it needs to. If you've ever been the capable one, the one who made it look easy, the one people assumed didn't need anything, I want you to know that making it look easy doesn't mean it was. It means you were quietly carrying something that nobody bothered to ask about. You don't have to keep making it look easy for people who weren't paying attention. What time is it where you are right now? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone.